Keep up with all of our shows and the latest headlines by following Extra 1063 on Instagram, X, Facebook, Truth Social, and all your social media platforms. Plus exclusive giveaways and more. So follow now at XTRA 1063.
I'm so delighted that this guy is in the studio with us this morning. Austin Moore is a guy that I've been communicating with for so long. You've been listening to the show, and we talked about the stuff that happened, and I knew that you were working with kids who are autistic, and we had that discussion because I have a nephew that has autism.
And I'd reached out to you when I was working at Recliff, which is in Peachtree Corners, as I was in the clinic, and I said, hey, we do this great work. Tell your nephew, or tell your, is it your brother-in-law?
Yeah, brother-in-law and his son, yes.
Right, and so I said, if you ever need it, we'll give you a tour, show us what it's all about. And that was 22, because I remember thinking,
are you serious? It's been that long?
I was still in the clinic, yeah.
I'm so glad that you've been reaching out to him for that long, because it took, and we talk about how things just happen in their own time. So I ended up watching an episode of Joe Rogan, and that led me to Kai Davidson, who did the whole telepathy tapes and did that entire podcast as far as these autistic children that are non-speaking. And I brought it up with Tug on Monday, and I get your post, and then that got everything going, and Tug's like, oh, no, man, I've been talking to Austin for this long. Like, I've been hearing from him for this amount of time.
I was like, what?
A few months ago, I reached out with the telepathy tapes to you, and I just said, hey, give it a chance. I promise it's real. And then when you said it, I said, this is my sign to reach out to Carlos.
Can I throw myself under the bus, as I always do?
Yes.
I didn't even remember you sent them to me.
Yeah,
until you brought it up just now.
So
totally
for anybody else out there, this is Austin Moore, and Austin has done this work in the community, working with these children, working with these young people. That we're talking about all types of forms of autism, but he's a communication specialist. And so when you get into the telepathy tapes and what some of these young people seem to be capable of doing, it seems supernatural, but you were the one who reached out and was like, no, this is like legitimate. We see this all the time in this line of work.
Sure. And let me, the first time this happened to me, can I give a little
please, by all means.
All right, so 18 years old, senior in high school, knew nothing about autism. I kind of fell into this world with a family, learned ABA, which is a behavioral therapy, in-house on the job. And so as I'm learning on the job, I get to see the spectrum of autism. It's, open my eyes that it's not just to my friend who I was working with. I grew up, put myself through college thinking I wanted to be a doctor, and this was just kind of like a job for me. But it was deep in my heart. I had good patience. I think it was God that put that in me. And so I kept working, and none of the spelling was in our lives at that point. So we had tried everything with my friend. The crystal therapy, the light therapy, any therapy that you can think of, he had gone through, and nothing really had gone above and beyond to show us something.
Is this about, just to clarify, is this about reaching this person in order to, spell that out when you say about nothing had worked?
So the behavioral therapy, I should say, got my friend ready to do what he's doing now. It gave him the foundation, and I think there's a place for all that. The education part of it is what struck me once he was able to openly communicate. I thought everyone felt, holy cow, we have been just letting you down all these years, and all of them are so graceful. He basically said you did the best with the knowledge you had at the time.
And he was able to communicate it through
19 years old. I started when he was 6. 19 years old, he's able to get this out, and we are heartbroken. And again, see, I get chills talking about it because it changed my life the first time I saw him spell. I knew I'd gotten away from just a few years, went into a side story of physician recruiting. I learned quick I'm not supposed to be on the phone making sales calls. Mm-hmm. I saw Reese speak through the letterboard for the first time and thought, what am I doing? There he is. And so transitioned from that back to autism, and I learned how to spell. And I kind of jumped in at the back end where I started communicating with open communicators.
And let me get that out there, because this was something that happened during the Joe Rogan podcast, and it's your specialty. When you talk about spelling.
Yes, that's right. That's where I was going to.
Clarify that for the audience about what that means when you're working with somebody, especially when they're nonverbal and they're autistic.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me back to that. So the spelling is all about purposeful pointing. So the gross motor of touching a letterboard, I know we're on the auditory.
Well, but
media,
we're on YouTube as well.
YouTube, yeah.
So we have-
as you told us, you watch us on YouTube.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
put them up with the camera.
So we have our letterboards, very basic, A through Z. My bread and butter is getting my guys up to typing, and you're holding the letterboard. You're building this what I call a battery system of you got your client, you're the coach, you're holding the letterboard. It helps to hold it at their eye level. It's an ocular motor thing, less stress on the body. The motor breakdown is really what we think of with our autistic friends. They're there inside, but it's a motor breakdown to get the communication out. So the gross motor of pointing to each letter is much simpler than trying to speak with the hundreds of muscles we have here.
Sure.
And so this method, somehow, Soma RPM was the original OG. She kind of is the reason we're all here. She figured this out with her son, and it kind of spread into other. There's spelling to communicate. There's the speller's method. There's a lot of things that can help people with this communication technique. Now, my thing is that it's all about just purposeful pointing and noticing these patterns in these kids. That shows me that it's them, that they just have trouble getting there. And after time, I joke all the time about being Mr. Miyagi. Early on, it is very disciplined and very
regimented.
Yes. And so when that muscle memory starts kicking in and then their confidence builds, my voice stops being so like, yes, you're constantly coaching them. Go, find it.
Right, and being encouraging.
Right. And so when you're doing that stuff fades. People always see it early on, like, oh, you're prompting so much. Well, duh.
Right.
They all
because
need
we're learning.
Because that's the criticism sometimes.
Yes.
It's like, oh, you're coaching them up or you're touching them in certain ways.
Absolutely.
Right?
And don't get me wrong, there are practitioners that have done some harm to what I do, and it's frustrating. But I'm in the point in my career where the results are the data.
We're talking to Austin Moore. He runs more opportunities, and he's connected with Recliff over in Peachtree Corners, the nonprofit side of that, and on the board, right? You're on the board.
I'm on the board. So yeah, I went from the day to day. I'm still on the board with Reese. They're my family. But yeah, I learned how to spell through them. They're like second family to me. But as I started working with other families. Especially Houston. Houston was one of the guys that
in the telepathy tapes.
Well, let's set that up because
three
episode 3 is where I got introduced to Houston, who's here in Georgia, and his mother was like, we were the outcast. Yeah. We couldn't go to the grocery store. We couldn't go to church. We couldn't go anywhere because it was always a problem for somebody else. It was causing an issue for somebody else. As she said, I felt so trapped. She went through being a believer to losing her faith to having this breakthrough with her son, Houston, who came up, who'd never spoken, been nonverbal, and says, Mama, I love you. And she was like, that changed everything.
Yeah. And
she found her faith, and you know them. You've worked with them. Yes,
Katie. And she's written a book of Heaven that anybody can find on if they look up our group online.
I ordered it through Amazon already.
Hey, right, yeah. Carlos. All right, Los, my man.
I saw it when I saw the book. I was like, I'm ordering this thing. I read the reviews, and it
explains a lot. Yeah. And it does tie in spiritually. You know, there's a lot of stuff that these kids really at some point changed my life into where I thought they are so gracious and so loving, and it's all about love with them. And I think that is the key to communication is dropping all our ego and focusing on the love.
Well, let's get to that because that's the most important. I mean, I don't know the most important thing, but it's the most fascinating part, being able to communicate.
It's key.
Telepathically.
That is the idea of the telepathic bond, is that it always seems like when you went through the podcast that it was, whether it was a caregiver, whether it was the instructor, there was a bond with them that was more than just, I work with this kid. It's like, no, I care for this child in a way that goes beyond just a regular professional relationship. And it seemed like their telepathic ability was tied to love.
Yes. It's unconditional love too. And it's something that you experience when you get ingrained with these non-speakers. What drives me crazy are I understand the skepticism. I get it. But until people get ingrained and work, get their hands dirty and see it. And when I do this, I'm over 100 students I've worked with in just the spelling. I've gotten so many to open, and it's the same pathway. And if I keep experiencing the same thing over and over again, you can't tell me that you can't deny my experience.
That's right.
And so when I hear people on the other side of the world saying and feeling the exact same thing I am, and I've been holding it back not to sound woo-woo or crazy, But I'm like, this is so real, and why is no one talking about it?
That is the factor that I was amazed by listening to that podcast with the telepathy tapes, was the amount of people from around the country. You know, these are not people that know one another. They don't have regular interactions, yet they're all talking about the same sort of connections they have with these non-speakers. You know, you say you've experienced this, and I like how you called it, I'm not woo-woo, because every single one of them are like, listen, I'm not woo-woo.
But that's the thing. It's crazy because as a guy that had no experience, I heard of telepathy, but that's it. Like, I had no experience with it, no understanding of it. And as soon as it was explained to me, I was like, that makes sense to me.
Right.
I never felt like it was Sasquatch. I never felt like it was far off or woo-woo, to use your word. I never felt that way. And I don't understand, to be honest, how anybody that can listen to it and just dismiss it without at least wanting to explore it.
And so I learned to spell, and the heavy hitting stuff, which we can get into, came when I was working with powerful communicators in the clinic setting. I kept hitting this. It's a small percentage of people I've worked with. Again, I'm speaking from my experience only, and I don't represent any of these spelling groups out there. I have to put that out there because I know how some things can be cut up. I'm an independent contractor, and I had the opportunity to do this. I wavered. Should I do this? And I thought, I don't know if I'll get this chance again. And I'm already involved with something big that is kind of a snowball effect going. You two are not this fanboy right here too. So I had to take this opportunity to come and just talk to you guys.
I'll tell you, I know we're going to be up against it here for a break, but I guess my question as we get into the break and we get into some of the details of what you've experienced, how wild is it when you do what you do professionally to try and explain something that is almost completely unexplainable to people, where it goes completely against the science, that this is not possible. Right,
and going back to love, how do you measure love?
Yeah, it's impossible.
And so that's the same
but you
thing.
Know it.
Yes, and so it's the same feeling. Yes, it's one of those things where they want the material, they want the data, and it's something that can't be measured.
It can't be quantified.
Yes, and
it's like momentum in a baseball game or a football game.
Yeah, and I don't want to get sciencey, but maybe that is the quantum. Maybe it's something bigger than us that we don't understand yet. But we will figure it out. And I know that I'm on the right side of this wave of people changing how they're thinking. That's all we're asking, is to be open and change the way you're thinking towards these kids and adults. There's a wave of them coming, adults that have nowhere to go, parents that eventually need support.
Yeah.
And no one's really thinking about it. And no one's talking about the giant elephant in the room that we all want to figure out what's going on, but it starts with people accepting that this is a possibility.
Let's get in that elephant in the room next.
Yes, absolutely.
I need to hear about these experiences.
I want to know the relationship.
So now we got the background all cleared out.
You and Houston are able to communicate.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, God's timing is everything.
Absolutely.
Los had told me about this. You'd told me about it forever ago, but it wasn't until God had the plan to have you in here today.
And to be
he used my imperfection.
And again, to be under the umbrella of the Dickey Broadcasting Board, this is a soundtrack of my life. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I'm telling you, I wrote this down. God's timing. He used my imperfection to bring this message to you. I hope you enjoyed as much as we enjoyed talking about it. Austin Moore is our guest. We'll continue discussing the telepathy tapes and his own experience working with autistic children and the ability to communicate in ways that you could never even imagine until recently. Doug and Los, along with Austin, on Extra 106.3.
On Extra 106.3 to bring it to you straight every day without the spin. Extra 106.3 FM and the Extra app.
Doug and Los until 10 with our guest, Austin Moore. More Opportunities is his company, and he's connected with the Recliff folks over in Peachtree Corners on the nonprofit side. And we know that some of the Atlanta Braves are involved there, and very very proud of their service because of the relationship that they have.
So Matt Olson also worked with my buddy Reese. There was a time where just a couple of days when he was still in high school where I introduced Matt to some of the ABA or the behavioral therapy we were doing in the basement of, or he would go on many walks with my buddy Reese.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah, and then they just
that
stay.
Heart.
Yeah, if you go and watch recliff.org, it is RECLIF 1F community.org, recliffcommunity.org. Let me get that out. You can see the story of them. It's a beautiful story.
That's great.
So yeah.
All right. So the elephant in the room.
Yes.
So when whether it's through Reddit and they tell you, well, telepathy isn't real with these children, or when you have the telepathy tapes, they say this is something going on. What has been your experience? Because listening to that podcast and then hearing from other people, we've got a friend of ours that works in the industry, and she was like, no, it's legit.
Yes. So I started learning the spelling method, and this is so crucial that I am 100% convinced now, after doing this with, again, hundreds of students, that spelling is the absolute easiest gateway to this process. You have to follow there's a formula. I made a joke recently on one of my posts. It's like baking a cake. If you don't follow the recipe, it's going to be a mess. So it's all about, you're starting on these YouTubers. We have a board that's smaller letters, bigger targets. So they're you're picking nouns from a lesson. Let's person, place, or thing. I know the answer. You know the answer. And when you're spelling these words together and graduating to this, and then eventually, again, my bread and butter is the wireless keyboard to a screen. They can see what they're typing. As they're building these skills, you start noticing these patterns. Again, you know what you're spelling together. And this battery system I talk about is absolutely real. So as you're spelling, you're learning their patterns. You're seeing how they move letter to letter. And when you do that, I'm convinced that you're building these neurological like bridges. And as you do it more and more, these bridges get stronger and stronger and stronger, to where the known words, okay, now we're talking about a radio station. Can you put into your own sentence where we're going today? So then they have to use their own words, but it has to be about, we're going to the radio station. So you start building conversation that way. And then when they start using words that you're like, whoa, that was cool.
Where did that come from?
Yeah. And then you start, oh, cool. And then you just trust, like, this, there they are. They're communicating with me. And then when they start giving me paragraphs and this and that, it was beautiful. And then so in the case of Houston, when we got to a certain point, and he's going and going and going on sentences of his own.
And Houston is one of the one of the people, one of the
episodes
children
3 and 4 telepathy
episode,
tapes.
Yeah, there you go.
When me and Houston got to a certain point, he's writing sentences. He types out a word that I'm like, man, I was just thinking that a second ago. What a weird word, but appropriate for what we were talking about.
Oh, wow.
So
that's what triggered it immediately.
Yeah, and I was like, that was weird. So we kept going, and then it happens again, and it's too coincidental. So
Can you give me an example, like what one of the words might have been?
Oh, it could be like in the description I used, we were talking about school safety or something, and I had used the word school bus, which then turned into my word to help test my friends, and we had not used it, but then all of a sudden he went to this word as clear as day, almost like what I was thinking. He
started spelling.
He could tell that I was like, okay, not that. Where we at? And he went immediately and started spelling that word, and I was like, whoa, that was weird.
I think. Well, one of the aspects of telepathy tapes is when you had some of these teachers that would talk about how they started having to blank out their mind and think about different words because they felt like their students were able to draw on exactly what they were thinking and give them the answer that they were already thinking.
And it's kind of like the stages of grieving or whatever, where at a certain point, when it felt like it was a one-way thing, like what's going on, you start getting in your head. And then that's when I learned later on, the more people I worked with, they would tell me, you've got to stop being so anxious. Mm-hmm. And they'll tell my parents that same thing. You're too anxious. You got to calm it down. And so once I started meditating, once I had, quite frankly, a spiritual awakening, that was a personal thing with me. Their gracious words and their positive energy and love got me through a pretty heavy time in my life.
Wow.
And it's the reason I'm sitting here with you guys today, because I could have gone and done a lot of things, but I knew something was drawing me to autism. And then the telepathy thing, when it happened, and it would happen, it doesn't happen with everyone I work with. I have to say that. It's a very small percentage, and it's usually very powerful spellers. But I'm only talking about Houston right now. And when it kept happening, and I finally bring it up to Mom, she mentions it's kind of a thing.
She already knew. Yeah. She already knew.
Yes. And so it's a personal thing that happens. When you're ingrained, you know what's going on.
How do you have that conversation where you recognize there's something going on here, and Mom already knows about it? Like, is there a eureka moment?
Yet, or
yeah. I just tell her, it was like one of those, I had this weird thing happen. I kind of feel like he was reading my mind, and it was kind of like, well, yeah, that's kind of a thing. And
Yeah,
so
he does.
But she didn't want it. She didn't want to like shout it from the rooftops
Because of the response or
Yes.
reaction
This-
that it could
and
possibly
this is
get.
2015, right?
Oh, wow.
So then
That's
I
10 years ago.
start doing my. I'm still put it aside, and then, when it first happened, Houston's a different story. I'm talking about someone. The first person that happened to. I'm not. I'm just out of respect to the family.
Sure.
But Houston, he was one of my most powerful friends. But when I went to get trained and saw these parents in these conferences, they would try to talk about it in public, and everyone would shut it down.
Yeah.
Strange. And I thought, why does nobody want to say anything?
Yeah.
And so
I still don't know to this moment.
Right.
I
And
don't
then
know.
I realized, like, you can't lead with that because of the woo-woo people that are just like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
And so all of my parents that have come to me and said, I think something's going on, I'm like, thank goodness we can talk about this now, because they've told me it's not really my thing to share. It's something that's got to happen through the how am I trying to say this? The intentional, like, you want to learn what they
relationship,
want to say.
the
Yes.
intentional
You
relationship.
can't have doubt.
I
You
think
cannot
one of
have doubt.
and again, it's hard to then say, well, that's not happening. One of the wildest parts of telepathy tapes, and Tug, you're not there yet, but there's a portion where there's a parent who goes to bed, and at night they're coming up with the songs that they feel like their son is passing along to them.
Yeah.
It's like, I want you to write it in this way. Here's what, and then when they're awake, he would perform it. And
Wow.
that's when he was able to be able to speak. And so you wonder, like, if that's not enough of like hitting you in the face and saying, this is real, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
As you said, with certain powerful spellers, this is some sort of ability they have.
Yes, and again, when you're building the very structure of spelling, there's some kind of connection you're building together, and I use the imagery of coach, speller, board is this circular battery and you have to keep you keep your voice going to keep it moving along. Eventually, it fades, and when they get that confidence and start spelling things that you would like, things I would never talk about or say, and then they just trust you.
Did you ever do tests like the ones
Yes.
in the telepathy?
Well, so actually, me and Houston's mom would kind of play around with it. We'd go in. We'd have 5 categories. One, for example, would be southern states, just keeping it local.
Sure.
So she would text me from a different room while she was there, and she'd say, "Okay, category 1." And so he would spell a state with me. He would then have to go and spell it with mom. And the percentages were not very high. Like, we're talking he'd hit on like 10, 15% on that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a part of it where we don't quite understand. Like, how is it?
Some people can. Some people.
And how does it transfer?
Yeah.
Because there's definitely things that they've said that, again, in a place of the time of my life that I was in a spot where I wouldn't be so positive, where their words would pick me up.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good Lord works in
my
mysterious
God.
ways, man.
Oh my God! I mean, it makes me emotional thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because their words are beautiful. They don't hold grudges with the past, and this is absolutely a real thing. But I just warn people, like, this is not like a sideshow. This is, in my experience, it's not every single one, but it very much could be. I encourage everyone.
And you've
to be
not
open.
been able to communicate.
Just be
hadn't
open.
figured out the line
Exactly.
of communication with everybody.
And I think that is the part that is so hopeful. It's that for those people, for those parents out there, especially when they have an autistic child who is non-speaking, you start to find out they're in there.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, like, how do you get to them?
Right. And I always joke I'm a detective. I'm like a autism detective. I see so many body types that I can go in and try different things from my experience.
How do people get a hold of you, Austin, in case they want to ask you questions, in case they want to inquire about what you do for a living and working with kids? How do people reach you?
Sure. I'm on all the socials. The spelling side is at Spelling More. My last name, Moore. You can find me at Austin Moore. That's my personal one, More Opportunities. The nonprofit is recliffecommunity.org. We raise money for scholarships and community activities for our friends on the spectrum.
So it's the sweetest.
And I would love to come and talk to you later down the road about that when we have stuff coming up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We would love
100%.
to help promote anything that you are doing.
Very cool.
And that's the one thing that Dickey Broadcasting has been so good about, giving us the ability to talk. We have autonomy. We can talk about. We've never been one time in 4 years of the station has anybody come in here and said you can't talk about that or you must talk about this ever.
Okay, big picture, just presume competence, know that they're there, love them, and just talk to them like the age they are. And it's all about acceptance. If you deny it, they're going to feed off that, and they're going to know.
Just like anybody.
Just accept people for,
But that's any relationship.
Sure.
Right? If you're kind and thoughtful and caring, that's the way we all.
I just love how they pick up on it.
Me too, man. It's amazing.
I can't thank you enough for having me.
Austin, God bless you, man.
Thank you, Austin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. Pleasure to meet you. That'll do it for us. The 9 o'clock hour brought to you by Southern Exteriors, 8779 Southern, southernexteriors.co. For Austin Lose and Jeray, I'm Tug. Y'all come back now. You hear?